What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai sending you on here bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing you a video on Kamen Rider Build episode 23. This episode was really good, and I mean the show in general has been really good, but I mean this season is just such a great season. Personally, I mean I love this season a lot. So this episode is called The Phantom of the West, which is a cool name. I actually like that name a lot. And it has a lot to do with a particular character in this episode that only shows up for a few seconds, but is pretty important overall. So what does end up happening at the start of the episode is that we end up seeing that Sawatari or Kazumi, Kazumi Sawatari or Grease ends up going over to Sento, basically trying to, say, like, no hard feelings. Like, they basically try to act like they're buddies now. A little bit more so. Because that's the thing that's interesting about this episode. They come across as being kind of comrade-like in this episode. As far as Grease goes, he doesn't really act that way as much, but towards the end he really starts to show that a lot more so. That he's willing to work alongside Sento and Ryoga. That doesn't mean that he's willing to align with the government, but he's willing to work alongside them. And same with Sento and Ryoga. They're willing to work with, Ryoga and... Not Ryoga. They're willing to work with Grease and the Hokuto members because of the relationships they're forming now. That doesn't mean that, like, they support the ideals of each other, but it's just interesting, That's something that's going on here. So they end up doing all that, and the Hokuto members end up trying to part ways, but suddenly Mizora goes over with the bottle that she had that could have destroyed Sento, and she basically says, "You almost made me press this button, now you owe me dinner tonight." And what happens is that she ends up saying something cute, and immediately Grease recognizes the voice as Mitten's voice, the internet idol. So he immediately goes over trying to say all sorts of stuff, and he wants to take a picture with her, and what happens is that Sawa ends up saying, "Okay, you owe me $50,000. And he's like, "Well, I have $100,000, so what will that get me?" And in other words, he wants to do all that stuff, and suddenly the Hokuto members are like, "Wait, boss, we need that money to, pay for stuff. Like, what are you doing?" And that whole thing happens. Suddenly, Sento gets a call from the Prime Minister of Totoro, basically telling him that Hokuto was being taken over by Saito, and at that point, they realize that things have changed. So then, what happens is that Grease or Kazumi ends up contacting the Prime Minister of Hokuto, which ends up having Bloodstalk on the phone. And when they end up talking to each other, it's clear that Bloodstalk was not working with Hokuto. Initially, it was thought that was the case. It's not. But at the same time, it's not even clear if he's working with Saito. In reality, he could be working through something entirely separate out of anything, really. I mean, it's unclear as to where he really is aligned. He's more aligned right now with Saito, but that doesn't mean that he's aligned in general with them. That's the thing that's really interesting. I mean, he's like a spy on all ends, which is really interesting overall and makes you think a lot. So that all happens. What we do end up seeing is that they then have to return to the Totoro Government Institute, where everyone goes in there, including Grease and the Hokuto members that are alive. And what happens is that one of them actually goes off. So they wonder where that member is, and that is Kiba. Kiba is the one that's missing. And the thing is that the other member that's still there ends up trying to call out for him. He's wondering if he's still in the building. He keeps trying, and then suddenly they end up receiving a message from the Saito Prime Minister, basically to address Grease and tell him that, and basically show him that the Sawatari farm is being attacked by, the guardians of Saito, and that, he has to be careful. And suddenly what happens is that Kiba is actually in Hokuto now. He actually shows up in Hokuto, and he tries to stop the Guardians from attacking the farm that Grease's family owned. And the thing is that suddenly we end up seeing these two characters who end up using the transformation, this new transformation gun that we've seen before, when Bloodstark uses it, and when and when Night Rogue uses it, but it's a different version of it. It's a different version of it entirely that's more for riders specifically, but they end up using it and end up becoming the Engine Bros and the Remote Control Bro, which they still haven't referred to them by like their technical name, which is the Washio Bros, but that's going to be something that they should eventually say. And the thing is that they both have different powers, and so what happens is that suddenly Kiba transforms into his, smash form, and what happens is that, he ends up fighting these two, and then gets captured, and basically, the Saito Prime Minister basically says, if you want to save your comrade, you must come and serve Saito. So at that point, he has to go back to Hokuto. And Ryoga wants to go and help and wants to go directly there. The thing is that, the problem that Sento and the Prime Minister of Totoro basically says is that if the riders from Totoro go to Hokuto, this could intensify the war significantly. So they have to stay elsewhere. So what they end up doing is that Sento and Ryoga actually go to the Sky Road while Grease and the remaining member of Hokuto, which I'm forgetting his name now, I think it's Aoba. No, but Aoba's the one that died, I thought. The other one end up going back to Hokuto. So they end up returning there, the two of them, and trying to get back their comrade who is tied up. And what happens is that the remaining member tries to fight against the brothers, and also Grease tries to fight against him, and eventually they realize that the situation is getting really bad, and the two members from Totoro promised that they would be at the Sky Road, and Grease basically realizes that they're going to back us up, so we should be mindful of that we should get back there as soon as possible so that they can help us out. And what happens is that suddenly Grease ends up, grabbing, Kiba, and uses the rose bottle. Because the thing is that the copter bottle, because what happens is that Sento gives him some of the Hokuto bottles, and one of them is that one, which he ends up using, and they end up retreating away, but the two bros end up following after them. And they get into a battle where at one point the, Kiba is dying, and he's in really bad shape, and he feels really messed up, and suddenly there's an attack that occurs that could have destroyed Grease, from the Engine Bro, I think it was one or the other, and he ends up using it, but what happens is that Kiba jumps in front of him and takes the hit, because he's practically dying anyway, so he just takes it because he knows he's going to die, and he'd rather save his boss. So he does that, and basically what happens is that the same thing happened with Aoba, where he basically says his actual name, which is like Shuichi, I think it is. And what happens is from here, Kiba basically says, I knew that you were lying this whole time about having amnesia, because that was the thing. He didn't have amnesia, but he told the members of the trio that he had amnesia, that he didn't know their actual names, and he kept lying about it. And basically, there was this moment where where Kiba's laughing, and he just passes on, and that's the end of Kiba. So yeah, 2 Hokuto members are dead. There's still one more Hokuto trio member that's live, but the question is, how long will he last? So we'll have to wait and see about that. But what does end up happening is that they continue to retreat. They first try to fight a bunch, and then eventually, when there's an attack that occurs, the last hard smash member of the Hokuto Trio, ends up doing a blast that creates a whole shroud of smoke, and suddenly they manage to escape and go to the Sky Road where Sento and Ryoga are. At that point, the engine and the remote control bro end up getting to the Sky Road and bringing them to Totoro. And what happens is that at the Sky Road, we end up seeing a battle occur where Sento actually uses the Rabbit Tank hazard mode, and Ryoga uses, his cross the charge form, which is his standard form mostly in most episodes nowadays. Ever since he started using that, it's become his form. I mean, he hasn't really used standard cross Z in quite some time. So anyway, they end up fighting. Sento tries to use Rabbit Tank Hazard. It doesn't work long enough for him to stay in control, and he begins to lose control. So what happens is that Ryoga ends up blasting the hazard trigger, making it so that he reverts back to Rabbit Tank form, which is just the standard Rabbit Tank form. And what happens is that Sento's like, I thought I could do it. So at that point, he ends up changing into Rabbit Tank Sparkling, and they end up continuing to fight the engine and remote control bro, or just in general the Washio bros. And eventually, we end up also seeing the rider for the episode begin to get transformed. And his transformation is so sick. Like, it's so awesome. I loved it. Because there's just this high-pitched scream, and it just sounds like evil and darkness. Like, I mean, it says danger, danger. It's just like, and it's just so cool. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's just a really cool moment. Now, the other thing I forgot to mention, and this was an important point, is that we do learn who actually made the rider systems that the engine and the remote control bros are using, which Utsumi made them, and the system that they're using is the Kaiser system. So that is interesting. And just in general, it's interesting to know that Utsumi is the one behind the technology here. So people were suspecting at first that Utsumi might actually be Kamen Rider Rogue. That isn't the case, and I'm actually kind of glad because of how things were set up in a way. Just in general, Utsumi is a very interesting character, but I think it's smart that they decided to make Rogue who they did. We'll get into that towards the very end, and it's pretty obvious at this point. So what does end up happening after this is that eventually Rogue joins the battle, and the two Washio bros end up retreating, and what we end up seeing is that Sento and Ryoga try to fight Kamen Rider Rogue. And at first, he doesn't flinch at all. He just basically stands still, doesn't make any movements at all. And following this, what ends up happening is that they eventually wonder who this rider could be. And the thing is that he says that the rider says Kamen Rider Rogue, and Sento and Ryoga think Kamen Rider Rogue. Oh, and at that point, what happens is that Kamen Rider Rogue takes out his bottle, and it's confirmed to be who we thought it was, which is Gintaku. Yes, Gintaku is Kamen Rider Rogue, which is good. I actually like that a lot. I think that's going to be really good. It makes more sense overall. But yes, he is the rider for Saito now. Obviously, as we know in the past, he ended up leaving Totoro a couple episodes ago, and he said he'd come back stronger and more powerful. So yes, that is the case now. We know for a fact that he is working with Saito, and he is going to be going up against his father. In the preview clips, we actually get to see him confronting his father and using the steam gun right near him. He doesn't actually shoot necessarily, we don't know yet, but he actually points the gun to his father's head, which is pretty crazy. So we'll have to wait and see what actually happens in the next episode. I'm very excited to see how Rogue will work in the show, because this show's just been really insane, and I don't know, they've done some really amazing things in general. I mean, I can't wait to see where this show will go from here. There's a lot of new power-up forms that will be happening for several different characters in this season. I don't know. One thing that's still very unclear is to whether or not Grease will last. That's the one thing I will say right now. Judging from certain images I've seen about power-ups and stuff, it doesn't look like Grease is getting any power-ups, which could mean that he's going to die. Or it might mean that he will continue to just stay as he is. It's still unclear. You know, they might announce something later on that would be for the end of the season, and he would just continue to be Grease for the whole entire show. That could happen. Doesn't mean it will. We don't know yet. And I don't want to assume anything. I'm personally hoping that he remains throughout the show because I really do like his character a lot. I think that he's a really cool character, and it would be kind of pointless for him to not last. But at the same time, the fact that he has no power-up modes kind of is one of those situations where you kind of wonder, like, will they actually give him another mode? I don't know yet. I hope that they do. Even if it's in the fourth quarter of merchandise, I hope that they give him a additional form at some point. I don't know if they will, but I'm hoping for it. So I would love to know your guys' opinions. Are you guys excited for the next episode? And just in general, what did you think of this episode? I personally enjoyed it a lot. If you're wondering what all that noise is, there's a lot of cars passing by. Right now where I am, it's snowing. It snowed like crazy, so there's a lot of trucks and stuff, and it's really loud. So yeah. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I would love to know your guys' opinions, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.